Hello, I'm Robert, and helping you if you're scared of this object, 2018 VP1, and it's getting all sorts of crazy things saying, oh, NASA has said it's going to hit Earth, and a disaster's going to ensue, and it's the day before the US elections, which is the main reason for the publicity, I think. But there's nothing here to be scared of at all. It's a tiny, tiny object, 2 meters. The size of a human being, hitting into the atmosphere at kilometers per second. The atmosphere protects us from things like this. If you were on the moon, then you could be harmed by a 2-meter object because there's nothing to protect you. If you were so unlucky as to be exactly on the exact spot on the moon that this 2-meter object hit. But on the Earth, you can't be harmed by it at all. It's just going to burn up in the atmosphere. And so a little bit more about it. There's New York Post. It says asteroid heading our way before election day. And this is another video I did about it before. I'm just doing another one. And so these things like that and bigger have been predicted before. So I didn't mention that in my previous videos. So this is an example. This is 2008 TC3. And as you can see, you see when it comes up. See there's this little thing moving. See that little thing moving in the centre of the screen? It's kept stationed on the object. That was a tiny, tiny 4-meter sized object that they've got these very sensitive telescopes looking out for them. This was a fireball that's seen from the atmosphere. This is bigger than this one. This was the trail of smoke it left behind, or whatever you call it. Just the field, the trail it left, just the trail it left in the atmosphere. And this is what survived to the ground, tiny, tiny little bits of material. And remember, this started off as a 4-meter sized thing. And that's what it was by the time it got to ground level. They could find it because it landed in the middle of a desert, and these things are easy to spot if you've got very keen eyes and know what meteorites look like amongst all the other stones in the sand. But these things are falling all the time. If you go out for a walk, it's quite possible that you'll just walk straight past a little bit of a meteorite that fell out of the sky, because it would soon just mix up with all the other stones, and unless you're an expert, then you know it could be a meteorite and take it in and test it in a very careful way, then you're never going to know. So most of our meteorite collections come from the deserts, where keen-eyed people can see them, or from the glaciers in Antarctica is a very big source for meteorites. The reason isn't because they fall in deserts, particularly, it's just that you can see them there. And these tiny, tiny stones that are constantly falling out of the sky, then they're not going to harm you, even if you walked underneath them. You might get a little thing that sort of lands on your head and you think it's fallen off a tree, and actually it was a meteorite. It's not impossible. If you go and get the dust or mud out of your gutters, some of that is little specks from meteorites. It's constantly falling all the time, and you can pick up the ones from the very rare iron meteorites with a magnet, and you get little tiny little particles. Most of them are from industrial pollution, but some of them will be from iron meteorites, and if you are an expert, you can do the proper analysis, then you can actually find tiny specks of iron meteorites just by using a magnet and getting it out of your gutter. So, but it's like the mouse falling off the Empire State Building. These little bits of asteroid are not going to harm you. And this was another example. So, and there was one, sometimes there was a fireball they detected, the very first fireball they detected in advance, and nobody saw it. If it's cloudy, nobody's going to see it. And this was another one, 6 years later, 2-3 meters, that was its path. And the red dot where it probably, this was another one that nobody ever saw it, but they found it by looking at the fireball's infrasound measurements. So it's entirely possible nobody finds it. And this is an actual video of one that was predicted in advance. So you won't see much. It's only 8 seconds of it. But you just see that, that's it. You see it? So that's what you might see. And these are all the locations of people who saw it, that particular one. And yes, you can die of meteorite impact, but it's extraordinarily rare. The no known deaths by meteorite in the US or Canada in all of their recorded history. There is one example of a woman whose thigh was very badly bruised and she had to go to hospital. And that is the entire meteorite harm record for the United States for 300 million people for several centuries. 300 million people now and however many it was back then. Meanwhile, 20 people died of lightning in 2017 in the United States. Just a year I have figures for. And the death by hailstone, the last time that happened was in the year 2000. So if you're worried about something falling from the sky and killing you, then a hailstone is a much, much higher risk than anything to do with meteorites. Just be careful, don't go out. If that was a chap who was very foolish. He saw hailstones damaging his car. And he must have felt he was impervious to damage or something. He went out and he managed to survive going out to his car, dove into shelter, then he came back again and he was killed on his way back. If you see hailstones damaging your car, then it's not a safe place for you. Don't go out, and however much you care about your car, or his Jeep or whatever it was, don't go out and try and drive it to safety if the hailstones are putting dents in it. You just have to deal with a dented car. Anyway, and this is an example, another example. This is a better video, but not predicted in advance. Fireball in the southern sky somewhere. So it's just to give you an idea. So this is another idea. Yeah. And then it just disappears. So the other one you didn't see the disappear point, but you saw how that one got very bright, and then it just was gone. Oh, it's running again. That's another view of it. Anyway, so that's all. If this does hit, you just get something like that, goes whoosh, and then at the very end it's very bright. That's when it blows up basically in the upper atmosphere. It gets smashed in smithereens, but it's so high up it's not going to harm anyone. It's not radioactive. People sometimes say, oh, this is equivalent to so many kilotons. It is quite a lot of energy because it comes in at huge speed, but the atmosphere is very, very thick. It's like 10 meters thickness of water above your head in terms of amount of density of it. And that is easy enough to just tear, and then something going in hitting at it, kilometers per second into 10 meters thickness of water. There wouldn't be much left by the bottom, not of something just 2 meters in size, and that's what happens up there. They just get torn to tiny, tiny little bits and melted and broken into little bits of dust. So there's nothing to worry about. If it's a very rare iron meteorite, then more lands to gets to the surface, and you could get a bit of a dent in this ground. And there's an example here. I think it was either an iron meteorite or a somewhat larger meteorite, but there's much less, people occupy much less of the surface. Here we are. There's an example. I don't know how big the meteorite was. They formed a tiny crater. It was very high up in the Peruvian mountains, 12,500 feet, 3,800 meters. And it formed a crater 30 meters by 30 meters deep. And there's one villager who happened to be cycling past, and he was riding a bicycle, and then this thing fell, and and created a crater, and he fell off his bicycle and was dizzy for a short while. But even though it was very loud, his eardrums weren't ruptured. So you do get, I mean, if he was incredibly unlucky and he'd been in the actual place where it hit, and that shows how you can get these very, very, very rare deaths by asteroid that happen, a few times per century over the entire world. So, because people occupy much less of the surface of the Earth than you'd think, and most of the Earth is just sea, oceans, ice, glaciers, desert, forest, fields, and even though you do get these occasional ones that create tiny craters, then still your personal risk is absolutely minute, far, far less than of dying of a hailstone. So hopefully that's enough to help some of you be less scared by this totally and this thing, it's not even predicted to hit. It's less than 1 in 100 chance of it hitting. And as I said in one of my other videos, if you were hitting a golfer and you hit a ball towards the green, and then you said the 139 chance out of 140 that I've missed that green, altogether you haven't even hit the green, then you wouldn't back to your friends and say, oh yes, I've just done a fantastic golfing shot. I had 1 in 140 chance of hitting the green. You wouldn't say that. So to say that this is that they've, whatever the New York Times, not New York Times, New York Post is. New York Post is not a reputable, not like the New York Times, which is somewhat more reputable. You asked about heading our way, and they said something about that there's going to be that the NASA predicted a collision or something. Not true. It's expected to miss. But on that very, very remote chance, then you might have a fireball just before the day before the presidential election. But you probably will anyway, or might well, in the week before or something. They are very, very common. Somewhere in the world, so certainly you'll have one.